Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. Carl Jung spoke these words nearly a century ago, yet they resonate with haunting accuracy in our digital age. These weren't just observations from his clinical practice. They were revelations born from his own descent into what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of profound isolation that nearly destroyed him, but ultimately revealed the deepest truths about human solitude. Have you ever felt that emptiness that emerges when you're alone? Not the chosen solitude, not the peaceful moments of rest, but that peculiar modern suffering, the kind that seems to drain your vital energy, even when you're surrounded by entertainment, notifications, and endless possibilities for distraction. You've probably noticed how, paradoxically, the more we try to fill silence with noise, the deeper the sense of emptiness becomes. How scrolling through social media while sitting alone somehow makes the loneliness more acute, not less. How binge-watching series or podcasts creates a momentary illusion of connection, only to leave you feeling more hollow when they end. How even in a crowded room, you can feel more isolated than if you were physically alone. This is not just about being physically alone. This is about that peculiar modern suffering, the inability to be with yourself without feeling like you're slowly dissolving. It's the restlessness that kicks in the moment external stimulation stops. The anxiety that whispers you're wasting time if you're not consuming something, producing something, or connecting with someone. The creeping sense that without constant input from the outside world, you might simply cease to exist. Notice how this loneliness has a particular quality. It's not the gentle melancholy of missing someone you love. It's not the bittersweet ache of nostalgia. This is something more existential, more threatening. It's the feeling that when you're alone, you're confronting a fundamental emptiness at the core of your being, as if solitude strips away all the roles you play, all the identities you've constructed, leaving you face to face with. What, a void? A stranger? Something you don't recognize as yourself? This isn't a simple problem of social skills or a lack of hobbies. This isn't resolved with positive thinking or keeping yourself busy. This is a profound reality, a silent condition that affects millions of people who appear perfectly social and successful on the surface. They excel at dinner parties. They have active social media presence. They're skilled at small talk and networking. But the moment they're alone, truly alone, something inside them starts to unravel. Most explanations you've heard are superficial. Join more activities, they say. Be more social, they suggest. Practice gratitude, they recommend. Learn to love yourself, they proclaim with empty enthusiasm. But these solutions barely scratch the surface of what's really happening in the depths of your psyche. They're like offering a band-aid for a wound that goes to the bone. The truth is, what you're experiencing has roots that extend far deeper than modern psychology is willing to acknowledge. There's a much deeper cause for this suffering, and Carl Jung was one of the first to uncover this psychological mystery. What he discovered about the human mind reveals why modern loneliness feels so different, so much more existentially threatening than any generation before us has experienced. Jung understood something that most therapists and self-help gurus miss entirely. Your loneliness isn't a problem to be solved. It's a symptom of a much more profound disconnection that lies at the very heart of modern existence. The truth is, what you're experiencing isn't just loneliness. It's what Jung called a disconnection from your own unconscious. It's the result of living in a world that has systematically severed us from the deeper layers of our own psyche. But to understand this fully, we need to dive into Jung's revolutionary discovery about the architecture of the human mind. Jung understood that every human being carries within them what he termed the collective unconscious. a deeper layer of the mind that connects us not just to ourselves, but to all of humanity. This isn't just poetic metaphor. Jung discovered through decades of clinical work that there are psychological structures within us that we share with every human being who has ever lived. Archetypal patterns, universal symbols, primordial images that surface in our dreams and fantasies, whether we're born in New York or the Amazon rainforest. When we lose touch with this inner world, we don't just feel alone in our room. We feel alone in existence itself. We become cut off from the very source of meaning that has sustained human beings for millennia. It's like being a tree that has forgotten it has roots, trying to sustain itself only through what it can capture from the surface world. Think about it this way. Imagine your psyche as an iceberg. The conscious mind, your daily thoughts, your social media interactions, your work tasks, your plans for the weekend, that's just the tip above water. Most people live their entire lives on this tiny surface, never suspecting what lies beneath. But Jung discovered that beneath the waterline lies a vast underwater mountain of unconscious material. Dreams that carry messages from the depths, archetypes that connect you to the fundamental patterns of human experience, suppressed emotions that carry vital energy, creative impulses that have never seen daylight, ancestral memories that inform your deepest instincts. Modern life has trained us to live exclusively on the surface of this iceberg. We've become strangers to our own depths. We've been taught to trust only what we can think, measure, and control. Everything else, the mysterious, the symbolic, the paradoxical, gets dismissed as irrelevant or dangerous. And here's the crucial insight Jung discovered. When you're disconnected from your unconscious, you're not just alone. You're alienated from the very source of meaning and vitality within yourself. This manifests in our daily lives in ways we rarely recognize. The compulsive need to check your phone the moment you wake up, that's not just habit, it's an unconscious attempt to avoid the discomfort of being alone with your deeper self. Your ego is terrified of what it might encounter in those first moments of consciousness, so it immediately seeks external stimulation. The inability to sit in silence without immediately reaching for a podcast or music. That's your psyche fleeing from the unknown territories within. The endless scroll through social media while alone isn't really about connection. It's about avoiding the confrontation with your own inner emptiness. Each scroll is a micro-escape from the present moment, from the possibility that you might encounter something in yourself that you don't understand or can't control. The binge-watching of series isn't entertainment. It's a desperate attempt to live vicariously through fictional characters because you've lost touch with the rich narrative of your own unconscious life. Jung called this phenomenon psychological inflation, when the ego becomes so dominant that it cuts itself off from the nourishing depths of the psyche. The ego, in Jung's understanding, is like a small island of consciousness floating on an ocean of unconscious material. When the ego believes it's the whole of who you are, when it tries to manage life entirely through conscious control, it becomes like a person trying to survive by drinking only from a cup while ignoring the river flowing beneath their feet. But here's where it gets even more profound. Jung discovered that this disconnection creates what he called neurotic suffering. It's not just sadness or boredom, it's an existential ache that no amount of external stimulation can heal. Because what you're really missing isn't other people. It's the relationship with the vast, mysterious, creative intelligence that lives within your own unconscious mind. This is why the loneliness feels so different now. Previous generations had rituals, traditions, and cultural practices that naturally connected them to these deeper layers of psyche. They had mythology that spoke to the archetypal patterns within them. They had meaningful work connected to the cycles of nature. They had communities that acknowledged the mysterious and unknown. They had rites of passage that initiated them into the depths of their own being. Consider how different their relationship with solitude was. A farmer working alone in the fields wasn't just isolated. He was connected to the rhythms of earth and sky, to the archetypal patterns of death and rebirth played out in the seasons. A craftsman working alone in his workshop wasn't just by himself. He was in dialogue with the materials, engaged in the ancient dance between consciousness and the unconscious creative process. We live in a world that has replaced mystery with information, depth with speed, and inner exploration with external consumption. We've created a culture that treats the unconscious mind as irrelevant at best, dangerous at worst. We medicate dreams, we pathologize introspection, we reward only what can be measured and quantified. We've built a civilization that essentially wages war against the very psychological structures that create meaning and connection. And so we find ourselves in this strange modern predicament, surrounded by more ways to connect than ever before, yet feeling more fundamentally alone than any generation in human history. We have access to more information than any human beings who have ever lived, yet we feel more confused about who we are and why we're here than our ancestors who lived in caves. Jung identified this as a kind of psychological civil war. On one side, there's your conscious ego, the part of you that wants to stay busy, stay connected, stay stimulated. It's terrified of silence, of depth, of the unknown. It believes that meaning comes from external achievement and social validation. It's convinced that if you just optimize your life enough, if you just connect with enough people, if you just consume enough content, you'll finally feel fulfilled. On the other side lies your unconscious, vast, patient, filled with creative potential and deep wisdom. It speaks through dreams, through sudden insights, through the art that moves you to tears for reasons you can't explain, through the inexplicable longings that surface when you're quiet. It's the part of you that knows there's something more than the surface life you've been living. It's the source of your deepest creativity, your most profound insights, your capacity for genuine love and connection. The battle between these two parts of yourself is what creates that restless emptiness when you're alone. Your ego is afraid of what it might encounter in the depths, so it keeps you perpetually distracted. But your unconscious keeps calling, creating that persistent sense that something essential is missing. It's like having a conversation with someone who keeps interrupting you every time you try to say something important. Eventually, you might stop trying to speak altogether, but the need to communicate doesn't disappear. It just becomes a constant background ache. This is why no amount of external connection can fill the void. Because what you're really longing for isn't other people. It's the lost connection to the fullness of your own being. You're homesick for a place that exists within you, but you've forgotten how to get there. Jung discovered that this disconnection creates what he called symptoms, not just psychological symptoms, but life symptoms. The inability to be alone, the compulsive need for external validation, the sense that life is somehow flat, two-dimensional, lacking in depth and meaning. The feeling that you're living someone else's life, following a script that doesn't quite fit who you really are. But here's the most profound part of Jung's insight. He realized that this suffering isn't accidental. It's not just the unfortunate byproduct of modern life. It's actually your psyche's way of calling you home to yourself. The loneliness, the emptiness, the restlessness, these are symptoms, yes, but they're also invitations. They're your unconscious mind's way of saying, there's more to you than this surface existence. There are depths within you that you haven't explored. There's a conversation waiting to happen between your conscious mind and the vast intelligence that lives in your depths. So here's where we are. You're not just dealing with simple loneliness. You're experiencing a disconnection from your own unconscious mind, the very source of meaning, creativity, and deep fulfillment within yourself. You're not broken, you're not antisocial, and you're not weak. You're experiencing the natural consequence of living in a culture that has severed us from our psychological depths. Your loneliness is actually a form of spiritual hunger. Your soul calling you back to the conversation with yourself that our culture has taught you to avoid. But here's Jung's profound insight, and this is where hope begins. This disconnection isn't permanent. The unconscious is always there, waiting patiently for you to remember it exists. It's been sending you signals all along, through your dreams, through the books that mysteriously call to you, through the moments of unexpected beauty that stop you in your tracks, through the sudden insights that arise when you're not trying to think of anything at all. The path forward isn't about fighting the loneliness or trying to fill it with more external stimulation. It's about developing what Jung called active imagination, the ability to consciously dialogue with your unconscious mind. It's about learning to be alone, not as an empty ego, desperately seeking distraction, but as a complete being in relationship with the vast intelligence within yourself. Think about what this means. Instead of loneliness being a problem to solve, it becomes a doorway to walk through. Instead of solitude being something to escape, it becomes a space of profound encounter. You're not just sitting alone in a room. You're meeting with the deepest aspects of your own being. You're not just killing time. You're entering into the timeless dimension of your own psyche. Jung discovered that when you begin to pay attention to your unconscious, something remarkable happens. You start to feel less alone, even when you're by yourself. Because you're no longer just an isolated ego floating in empty space. You're in relationship with the deeper layers of your own psyche. You become your own fascinating companion. You discover that the most interesting conversation you can have is with the mysterious intelligence that lives within your own mind. The first step isn't forcing yourself to enjoy solitude. It's simply beginning to notice what happens when you're alone without distraction. What thoughts arise, what feelings surface, what images float through your mind, what dreams have you been having, what memories keep returning. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone, spend just 5 minutes observing the inner landscape that emerges in silence. But this isn't just passive observation. Jung discovered that you can actually engage with your unconscious through what he called active imagination. This means treating the images, thoughts, and feelings that arise in solitude as if they were messages from a very wise but mysterious friend. You can ask questions. What are you trying to tell me? What do you need from me? What am I not understanding about my life? This is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of yourself. It's not about becoming more social or finding more activities. It's about discovering that the richest relationship you can have is with the mysterious depths of your own mind. Jung understood that this process requires courage. It means facing parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. It means sitting with uncomfortable feelings instead of immediately distracting yourself. It means trusting that there's wisdom in the chaos of your inner world, even when you can't understand it. It means treating your dreams, your fantasies, your creative impulses as valuable communications from the deeper layers of your psyche. But here's what Jung discovered. When you begin this dialogue with your unconscious, you don't just solve the problem of loneliness. You discover a source of creativity, insight, and meaning that no external relationship can provide. You become genuinely interesting to yourself. You develop what Jung called psychological substance, a sense of depth and richness that makes solitude feel not like emptiness, but like fullness. The loneliness you feel is actually your unconscious calling you home to yourself. It's an invitation to discover the vast inner world that our culture has taught you to ignore. When you answer that call, solitude transforms from emptiness into fullness, from isolation into profound self-companionship. You realize that you're never really alone. You're always in relationship with the mysterious intelligence that lives within your own being. This is Jung's ultimate gift to us. The understanding that the cure for modern loneliness isn't more connection with others. It's the recovery of connection with ourselves. Not the surface self that social media knows, but the deep self that dreams, creates, loves, and contains within it all the wisdom of human experience. What was the strongest insight you had watching this video? In what part did you see yourself reflected? What aspects of your own relationship with solitude are you beginning to question? Leave your comment below. Let's create a space for exchange and deep conversation about this journey back to psychological wholeness. If this resonated with you, subscribe to continue this journey of self-discovery. Because understanding Jung is just the beginning. There's an entire inner world waiting for you to explore, and the conversation between your conscious and unconscious mind is the most important dialogue you'll ever have. You don't have to make that journey alone, but you do have to be willing to discover that the most profound companionship comes from within.